Hello, I'm Linda Graham, author of Resilience, Powerful Practices for Bouncing Back from Disappointment, Difficulty, and Even Disaster. In this series of conversations on resilience, you'll learn from many experts offering practices helpful to them in recovering their own resilience. In this conversation with Ron Frederick, we're learning the lifelong practice of slowing down, making space for, and being with our emotions, bringing our observing awareness online, and engaging with, listening to, and getting guidance from our hardwired and emotional system that allows us to become wise stewards of our being human. Welcome to this conversation, exploring resources for recovering resilience. Today I'm talking with Ron Frederick. Ron is a clinical psychologist who emphasizes the transformative power of emotional and relational experiences in his psychotherapy practice and in his nationwide trainings. Ron is also the author of the award-winning Living Like You Mean It and the forthcoming book, Loving Like You Mean It. Ron and I met in an initial immersion training in accelerated experiential dynamic psychotherapy. Ron is now a senior faculty member at the AEDP Institute, and he's the co-founder of the Center for Courageous Living in Beverly Hills, California. So Ron, it is so good to share this time with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's great to be here with you, Linda.
So if we see resilience as capacities to face and deal with life's challenges, the ability to cope well and skillfully with everyday disappointments and even difficult disasters, how can focusing on emotional and relational experience help people become more resilient?
That's a great question. Now that we understand that emotions are wired in experiences, for a long time, that wasn't the case. Cognitive science ruled and prevailed, I should say, and the belief was that thinking, preceded emotion. But now what we understand through affective neuroscience and different studies is that our emotions are actually wired in responses. So if we're not mindful of our feelings, if we're not paying attention to them, then we're really not being good stewards of our beings, of our being human. Right? And for the most part, our emotions are there to be helpful to us. So how does paying attention to our emotions, I think was the question, help build resilience or allow us to be resilient?
Right.
Well, we're working in accord with how the system was designed to work. That's one piece. So we have different emotional experiences in life all the time, and emotions come online. If we can be mindful of them and present to them and comfortably move through them, they're going to be helpful to us. And in that way, our resource and help us be resilient so we can face different experiences. We can deal with different things that come up. And deal with them better if we're able to listen to and work with our emotions. However, that whole system gets kind of mucked up. It can get mucked up for some of us, depending on how our emotions were responded to early on in life. So that leads us to what I talk about, which is emotional mindfulness, which is not just being aware of our emotions and working to be present with them, but also recognizing the ways in which we may defend against our feelings or dismiss our feelings, or old anxieties may come up or fears may come up for us that cause us to behave in ways or misinterpret our emotions or distort our feelings. So the more that we can be mindful of it and disentangle our core selves from perhaps our early programming, if you want to call it that, then we're really then getting the benefits of our emotional system. So a lot of the problems that I see, oh, you want to talk? Just keep going. Go ahead.
Would you have an example? Do you have an example of how focusing on an emotional experience shifts things for someone and helps them be more resilient? Either an example that you've had or someone you know.
Well, there are lots of different examples. As I was thinking about this and preparing, I've talked to you about how my mother has Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And it's been, over the last 5 years, this really painful experience and so hard to face. We're talking about here, one of the more extreme kind of things that we face in our life, right? Mortality, the decline of a parent, and then losing them in this very, very painful way.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found that, the more that I'm able to allow space for and be mindful of how I am, how I'm feeling, when the emotions come, as best as I can, we have to go throughout our lives. We have to go out throughout our lives and do our things, and we don't always have the space. But when I'm tuned into that and I can allow for it, then, as you talk about, as you move through these things, you can shift, right? And then instead of fighting it off, which I think takes energy, I can shift and I can come back to my life that's still happening. The aspects of my life that are still happening, and the joyous experiences that are still happening. Not that they aren't somehow colored by this experience with my mother, but there's intense moments of pain and sadness, and and each time I visit her, it really comes to the forefront, and then I find the more I face things, kind of the more I bounce back and I going, and not just keep going like slogging through it, but like I'm able to come back and engage.
Right. Do you have a particular go-to practice that you turn to that pretty reliably helps do that shift or helps you build your resilience?
Well, as you know, and talk about, there are tons of things that you can do to foster resilience. The thing that I talk about a lot is emotional mindfulness. So it's listening to myself, it's being mindful of what's going on in my body. It's slowing down, getting my observer online rather than being reactive. That's a sort of a whole practice, a life practice.
Right.
And then I was at the gym this morning, where I'm at 5-6 days out of the week, and I'm doing my cardio, and this is one of the ways that I take care of myself, and it helps my mood, and it replenishes my neurotransmitters, the chemicals in my brain, and it helps me process things. And that's another way that I go to in terms of my own well-being.
Do you recommend or have suggestions for people of how to kind of pre-wire this resilience? Strengthen the resilience before there's a stressor, before there's an emergency, so that it's there to call on when we need it.
Yeah, I talk about emotional mindfulness as growing our capacity for emotional mindfulness as a practice, and it's really a lifelong thing that we engage in. You talk about this as well.
Right.
Taking care of ourselves and trying to be present in our lives is an ongoing practice. And I think that, it is doing that in the little moments that helps us to be able to cope with the bigger moments. So really, when we're doing that, when we're in different ways, focusing internally, listening to ourselves, recognizing when we're not present, coming back to our experience, the more we're working that, of course, as you know, we're growing skills, and we're growing capacities in our brain. And all of that, is foundational to is foundational and serves us well when we get to something. Like, as I say to my clients, if we're perhaps we're doing a breathing thing, something to help calm our nervous system, I say to them, don't just do this when you're feeling anxious, or really feeling anxious on the verge of a panic attack. Do it when you're sitting in your car and you're getting into traffic. I mean, LA gives people a lot of opportunities to practice, right? Or you're standing online at the grocery store, Notice how you're feeling. Notice how you want to react to that person who just cut in front of you, at the store. And in those moments, you're helping yourself out. You're strengthening these capacities that you can then use.
So do you have recommendations when people feel overwhelmed or not very resilient? They're feeling kind of stuck. What can help them recover and find their resilience again? How do they get out of that hole?
I think, there are lots of things that people can do. I think, when I think about this in a personal way, one of the things that is my go-to is relationship. And, my primary relationship in my life with my husband, that's where we help regulate each other, right? So he's distressed about something or I'm distressed about something, and I talk to him, and we support each other and listen to each other, and we also in the process hear ourselves. So it's getting something out, putting words to it.
Right.
And, that to me is one of the, what doesn't have to be a primary relationship, it doesn't have to be with a partner, it can be with anyone. But that person that that you can connect with in a certain way and get a sort of help to have a grounded sense of yourself and them.
Yeah, absolutely. So in our last few moments here, do you have any additional insights or even questions about resilience? Are there things that people don't often associate with resilience or think about in terms of resilience, but that would be important?
Well, I think, one of the things that people don't think about in terms of resilience or the fact that we have a whole host of unconscious things going on that we're not aware of. So we're implicitly wired to respond, in ways that we learned long ago, that sort of fly under the wire and we don't realize. And that's what I see a lot with clients who come to see me for help, right? That part of our work is becoming mindful of our nervous systems, of the signs that we're getting triggered or the signs that something's off, so that we can be more attuned to that and also see what's happening, the ways in which we have been responding that are not helpful to us, that we're not aware of, and making that shift.
Right. Thank you so much, really, for all the wisdom, all the sharing, all your warm heart. Thank you very much for being with me today. Really.
Thank you so much, Linda, for having me. It's a pleasure.
So these conversations will be archived on my website, lindagraham-mft.net. May they be truly useful and helpful to you and yours.